I think this recession is going to be worse than the Great Recession that started following the 2008 financial crisis. So, and remember, the government didn't see that one coming either. And in fact, when we were 6 or 7 months into that recession, the Federal Reserve and other economists still claimed that there was no recession anywhere in sight. So this recession is going to be much worse than that one. And what's going to make it particularly problematic is inflation, because inflation is actually going to be exacerbated by the recession. So Americans are going to have the worst of both worlds, a worse recession than the Great Recession of '08, but worse inflation than anything we experienced during the 1970s.
So let's take it part by part, Peter. So first of all, we hear the banks are well capitalized this time, they're stronger this time. How could it be a worse recession than 2008?
Well, that's what they said last time, right before the financial crisis. They said the banks were in great shape. Look, the banks are only in good shape until the value of their collateral collapses and people can't repay their loans. That's what happened in the last financial crisis. This one is going to be even bigger because the economy has a lot more debt now than it had in 2008. And Americans are less able to pay it when interest rates rise because the balances are much greater. So we're in much worse shape as a result of all the bailouts and all the stimulus that papered over the last crisis. And so now the one we're dealing with is going to be much worse because we kicked the can down the road instead of solving the problems when we had a chance.
Is there a remedy or is the damage already done?
Well, there's a remedy, but it's not without pain. And unfortunately, it's the middle class and the poor that are going to feel the pain the most. Because if the Fed fights inflation, it's middle class and poor people who are going to suffer the most during the inflation fight. If they don't fight inflation because they think they want to spare the middle class the pain of a horrible recession, well, then they're going to suffer even more with massive inflation. See, the Fed is only pretending it's going to fight inflation because it's also pretending that the economy is strong enough to withstand the fight. It's not. Even though the fight is inadequate to solve the inflation problem, it's going to cause a big problem for the economy that is so levered up on debt. And in fact, you talked about the Target earnings. Earnings are collapsing because Target customers are spending all their money on food. And Target doesn't make big profits selling food. It makes profits selling other goods that Americans are now too poor to afford. And so the bad news is now Target has to really raise prices even more, especially for food. And when you have people like Elizabeth Warren claiming that the businesses are gouging the customers, they're not. They're actually not raising prices enough. They have to raise prices more because the businesses have been taking a hit in their margins. And yes, they're going to have to prepare for reduced sales at higher prices because customers don't have the money, and that's when the layoffs begin. See, that's the problem. As companies have to downsize because their customers can't afford their products, those businesses can't afford their workers. And so we're going to get rising inflation and surging unemployment at the same time. Prices are going to go much higher for basic necessities, but eventually the government's going to have price controls, and that means a lot of these necessities won't even be available. You think we have shortages now, wait till you see how bad they get when government imposes price controls. So my advice is to shop now, buy what you can while it's still on the shelves and before prices go even higher.